We tend to remember the revolution as a united population rising up against a tyrannical king. The reality is messier. The conflict that forged the United States was America's first civil war, fought in the mud by violent neighbors. In 1775, only about 40% of the public actively supported the Patriot cause. 20% remained fiercely loyal to the British Crown. The remaining 40% were indifferent, simply trying to survive the crossfire. When disputes over taxation and parliamentary representation boiled over, the immediate targets weren't British soldiers. Colonists formed partisan mobs to terrorize local tax collectors, destroy their neighbors' property, and enforce political loyalty through public intimidation. Before Washington's troops ever fired a volley at King George's army, Americans were engaged in a brutal domestic struggle for control of their own towns and county governments. When open combat finally erupted at Lexington and Concord, there was no national military to fight it. The colonies defended themselves using isolated county militias, groups of local farmers and tradesmen answering only to their own state legislatures. These ad hoc units carried light, unstandardized weapons and lacked basic combat discipline. Because they were raised locally, they routinely refused orders to march beyond their home county lines or serve for more than a few months. Realizing this fractured system would collapse against British regulars, the Continental Congress took a massive political step. They authorized a centralized Continental Army and appointed a Virginia planter, George Washington, to wrangle the regional militias into a unified command. To outlast the largest empire on Earth, the colonies had to construct a legitimate national military from the ground up while actively fighting a war. By the late fall of 1776, that effort looked doomed. British forces had crushed Patriot defenses to capture New York City. The Continental Army had dwindled to fewer than 5,000 men, and public support plummeted as winter approached. Facing annihilation, Washington adopted a Fabian strategy, a military approach where a weaker force avoids massive head-to-head battles to preserve its troops. He deliberately retreated, trading physical territory for the survival of his army. During harsh winter encampments like Valley Forge, survival gave way to professionalization. Washington brought in Baron von Steuben, a Prussian officer who drilled the ragged troops relentlessly, teaching them standardized maneuvers and bayonet tactics. By refusing to fight on British terms, Washington bought his local recruits the exact thing they needed most: the time to learn the discipline required to stand fast on a European-style battlefield. In 1777, British plans to sever New England collapsed when their army surrendered at Saratoga. Pulling back to the Atlantic, the strategic reality is clear. Without a navy, Patriot ports were blockaded. Saratoga proved to watching European rivals that the Americans could win. That victory tipped the scales. France signed a formal alliance, soon followed by Spain and the Dutch Republic. They flooded the Patriots with desperately needed currency, gunpowder, and a fleet of warships. A localized rebellion over colonial taxes suddenly demanded global attention. Great Britain had to divert major military resources to the Caribbean and Europe, permanently weakening their grip on North America. Searching for a path to victory, British planners shifted their focus to the southern colonies. London strategists assumed the South was packed with silent loyalists, waiting for British protection to rise up and reclaim their states. The initial invasion looked flawless. Highly trained British regulars captured Charleston in 1780, taking 5,000 prisoners and effectively destroying the Continental Army in the South. But the British quickly squandered that advantage. They instituted harsh policies, forcing previously neutral colonists to swear oaths to the king or face property confiscation. The backcountry erupted into a vicious retaliatory guerrilla war between neighbors. The Loyalist militias the British rely on were systematically hunted down. At the Battle of Kings Mountain, Patriot irregulars completely destroyed a massive Loyalist force, crippling the Crown's ability to hold Southern territory. London gambled their entire North American strategy on weaponizing local Tory sympathizers. By alienating the neutral public and failing to protect their allies, they handed the southern interior back to the Patriots. Stripped of his local Loyalist support and harassed by Patriot forces, British General Charles Cornwallis marched his exhausted army to the coast. digging in at the port town of Yorktown, Virginia. Looking at this tactical map, you can see the final trap snap shut. A combined Continental and French army marched south to surround the peninsula by land, while the French Navy blockaded the Chesapeake Bay, cutting off any British retreat by sea. Trapped and bombarded, Cornwallis surrendered in October 1781. The overwhelming defeat forced Great Britain to the negotiating table, resulting in the 1783 Treaty of Paris, which formally recognized the United States as a sovereign nation. The 13 colonies did not secure their independence because they were a harmonious population acting in perfect unity. They won because they navigated a brutal internal division, secured foreign intervention, and forged a centralized army capable of outlasting a tired empire.